Okay. Okay, this open meeting of the Town of Auburn Board of Selectmen is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all open meetings
will now be recorded.
Publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, dial 1-408-650-3123 with access code 235-235-861. Or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/235-235-861. All supporting materials have been provided to members of this body and are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. And Dan's not remote, so we don't need any roll calls.
Correct.
With that, we'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I see we have no public comments at the outset. And with that, do I have a motion to move up agenda 3C, excuse me.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. It is a vote. So with that, we'll go to the presentation by Stephanie Cavino of the Blackstone Watershed Collaborative for a potential vote on approval of a resolution in support of the Blackstone River Watershed Needs and Assessment Report.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
My name is Stephanie Cavino. I'm from the Blackstone Watershed Collaborative based at Clark University, and I came here tonight to propose a resolution which we passed in a number of different communities throughout the Blackstone Watershed that looks at the history of the watershed, the work that's been done on compiling sort of the top 20 priority items for the entire watershed, and just sort of noting that we hope to include any of these goals into our local planning as appropriate. So I'll kind of go through and I'll give you a little bit of history of what we are and what we're doing here today, and I'm happy to take questions at the end. Or feel free to interrupt me and ask questions too. So like I said, the resolution itself supports the Blackstone River Watershed Needs Assessment Report, which is those top 20 items we'll talk about in a second, and the collaborative itself, which is this group of about 115 different organizations that have all come together under this new umbrella to be able to work together more effectively and cooperatively to enhance climate resilience and improve water quality throughout the region. We're looking to support the goals of this report, including things like enhanced maintenance of our waterways, enhanced recreational access to the Blackstone River and its tributaries, and implementation of nature-based solutions. And I'll talk about what those mean, but basically managing your stormwater as a resource rather than a waste product, thinking about where our water goes. And we intend to include these priority actions into local municipal goals as relevant, such as open space planning and climate resiliency planning. I will start out by saying this is a non-binding resolution. There are no teeth to this. It's really just more of an educational opportunity. So the watershed itself, to give you some background, it's about 48 miles long. It drops almost 450 feet over that. For perspective, the Taunton River, which is sort of our sister river over to the east, it's 40 miles long and drops only 40 feet. So this is a big change in elevation, and that has a lot to do with our industrial history. It's about 475 square miles altogether and has 39 communities over 2 states of Mass and Rhode Island, including, of course, Auburn. We always like to start with an acknowledgement of the indigenous lands that we're on, so we know that this is Nipmuc, as well as in other areas of the watershed, Pokanoket, Mashpee, Wampanoag, and Narragansett. And we have a bunch of resources if anyone's interested in learning more about the different Indian tribes that have inhabited this land. And with the Industrial Revolution in the 17 and 1800s, we took that change in elevation and dammed the river in a number of different locations. We created 49 different locks on the canal and also created a canal. So sometimes the river flowed naturally, sometimes it was very modified and channelized. And because of this, people have called the Blackstone River America's hardest working river, as well as America's most polluted river from a 1990 EPA study. So we've come a long way. The water's gotten quite a lot cleaner over the past 50 years. A lot of that's due to the 1972 Clean Water Act, which says we have to pay attention to what we're putting into our waterways. And we've also made massive investments in our wastewater treatment plant. So the Upper Blackstone wastewater treatment plant used to be a source of pollution. Now that water that's coming out of there meets clean drinking water standards, actually. So we've done a lot of work, but we also have a lot of challenges. We know that our land use is changing. We're creating a lot more impervious surfaces, those surfaces where water can't drain through, our rooftops and roadways, sidewalks, etc.
I did shut up.
As we add more of those impervious surfaces, we're decreasing our water quality because that water is gaining all those nutrients and sediments and things, and it's putting directly into our catch basins, which are leading to our waterways. We also know that our climate is changing. So with those impervious surfaces, instead of water going back into the ground, it's running off, it's collecting those nutrients. It's also warmer. Climate change is giving us a much warmer temperature. It's also giving us extreme precipitation. So instead of just raining a little bit here and there, we have these periods of drought like we saw this year, and then periods of heavy precipitation that our infrastructure simply wasn't built for that and can't handle. So our systems become really flashy. We have flooding in our more downtown areas. And with that increased drought, a lot of our communities have seen drinking water shortages. Worcester had to purchase millions of dollars of water from the Mass Water Resources Authority a few years ago because it ran out of water in its own reservoirs. The town of Millville has noticed that many of its private wells are going dry, and people have had to start redigging them to massive costs to their homeowners. So these are things that we want to think about. And we also know that our populations are expanding. So we're a very desirable location here in central Massachusetts, and people are moving in. And Worcester was actually the fastest growing city in New England. It surpassed over 200,000 people at our last census. And we know that throughout the entire region, both in our urban areas and our rural areas, our populations are growing. So especially with the ability for a lot of us to work at home, people say, okay, I don't have to live in the urban center. I can kind of live where it's these beautiful and have these access to nature, et cetera. But with that, we're developing that land and changing what it looks like. And we just need to be careful about how we're doing that. It's not that we don't want to develop. It's that we just want to be thoughtful about how we're developing. So we know that healthy communities depend on a healthy watershed and healthy waterways. So things I mentioned of nutrients, warm water, slashy systems, drinking water shortages, those can be issues. But if we have these benefits as well of recreation and tourism and physical and mental health, what happened during COVID, we all said, you know what, I got to get out of the house. I got to go for a walk outside. Everyone got a puppy. And we really appreciated that access to nature. We also know that our built infrastructure both modifies and is modified by our natural environment. Our transportation systems, think about things like culverts. So culverts are that pipe under a roadway, which allows the water to pass under. But if that gets flooded out and collapses, we're losing that roadway. It might collapse as well. And similarly, our municipal services. So our ability to have to go back and fix that roadway after it collapsed and fix that culvert. Or if there's a storm, we need to go out with our EMS and make sure that we're taking care of people and rescuing them. So we always want to keep in mind that there are sort of benefits to having these open spaces and natural systems, and there are also cost avoidances in keeping these natural systems. We always want to think about not only the costs, but also who our most vulnerable citizens are within our communities and how they're affected by these things.
Okay,
we know that impacts are not felt equitably, both in each community or throughout the watershed. This is a map of the entire Blackstone watershed, and it looks at things like heat islands where it's extra hot, tree cover, low tree cover, high asthma rates, where there's flooding and where there are water quality concerns. And we can see that the same areas are being hit again and again and again by each of these challenges, particularly in the northern and southern reaches. So the Narragansett Bay Estuary Program, which is a federally designated program, decided we really want to help you guys. And over a couple of years, they found that there was a historic lack of participation and funding in federal projects and state projects in this region. And they said, we want to help. How can we help? What is it that's preventing you from either applying for this funding or getting these projects or implementing them? And over 2 years, they got together about 140 people representing 40 different organizations and 11 different government agencies. And they made this needs assessment report. So these are the 20 things we can do to achieve more. And the top one was creating a collaborative, just bring people together, create a new umbrella, think about what these challenges are and how we can work together to solve them. So the Blackstone Watershed Collaborative was started last year. We try to fill in capacity gaps. So we provide a lot of technical assistance to communities and organizations. We try and prioritize projects that can have a larger impact in the community and the watershed, provide technical assistance, provide pass-through funding to communities and organizations, provide unified messaging, a centralized place to meet and share. So we meet monthly. Adam is a wonderful participant in those meetings, so we can stay up to date on what's going on in Auburn, and also a place to just celebrate successes and work together. So some of those opportunities of shared goals include things like maintaining our waterways, making sure that people have access to them, taking out trash, enhancing aquatic connectivity, and those things like culverts, making sure that they're passable and that they're not going to collapse. They're in good, safe condition, both for aquatic species being able to go underneath roadways as well as for transportation systems. Thinking about our natural green spaces, where we can protect them, where we can expand them, and how we can sort of incorporate that even into more urban environments through things like rain gardens or street trees. We also want to think about wetland and riverine restoration. So we've modified this a lot over the past 50, 200 years. So thinking about opportunities to restore some of that area and get those benefits back of things like flood protection. So I always like to say that the SNEP network is specifically focused on this area of Southern New England, and they do provide free technical assistance as well as resources about funding and financing of green infrastructure and climate resiliency projects. So please, please, please either let me know if you ever need help with that or go on their website and they have a form you can fill out. And what we try and do is not only as the collaborative trying to go to communities and have these conversations about what's most important to you and how can I help, but also taking all of those priorities and putting them into the different larger scale groups that I'm a part of and on steering committees and boards for to make sure that Central Mass is represented, because I find it's not a lot of the time. Is we get forgotten. They say Boston, Boston, Boston. And then you say, excuse me, wait a second, let's talk about Central Mass here. So I try and take those messagings further, and things like the CMRPC Imagine 2050 Steering Committee, the statewide climate change assessment, which is the hazard mitigation climate adaptation plan we do every 5 years in the state, and the Narragansett Bay Estuary Programs Steering Committee. So again, this resolution is non-binding. We've passed this in about 10 communities throughout the region. We're looking to have a diversity of communities pass this, both in terms of, for me, when I apply to grants, to say the work we do is understood by the local community, and we do have sort of direct connection, and also for the town. So you can say, hey, we're applying for, an open space grant or an MVP grant, and this isn't our first foray into this. We have a dedicated long-term history of supporting these different actions, and this can be one step in that process. So thanks for having me, and I'm happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the work you do in this very important area. Do we have any questions from the board?
Does this open us up to additional funding that we're not already taking advantage of?
Not directly, although the organization does have about $13,000 in technical assistance funding that we'll be giving out over the next year. So if there are specific projects that you're interested in, or things that need to get funded for relatively small money, that's something that I can help with. But whether you pass this resolution or not, I want to be able to support you.
No, through the chair, I'm not sure if I'm on. Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie. I just want to comment that our town planner, Adam Menard, has gone over the resolution, made some tweaks to make it more Auburn-centric, and that we're comfortable with the resolution. We feel it's not committing the town to anything other than just supportive of the initiatives of the Blackstone River watershed and the assessment report that they came out with. There's nothing but good things to benefit the town in the future. It's, as you know, a resolution is non-binding. It's not a legal document. It's just really an expression of support for an effort that I believe will benefit Auburn residents.
Tied to Central Mass, for that matter. All right, and with that, do we have a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the resolution in support of the Blackstone River watershed.
Second.
You want to read it? I'm just kidding. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Thank you very
so
much.
Thank you.
You want to give the license up?
Yeah, I think, and then we can go to that.
Okay. That's,
'Cause that was a stated hearing.
I would like to make a motion to move up 3B.
Second.
motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. All right, so we have Equipment East LLC for a motor vehicle Class 1, motor vehicle Class 2, and auto repair license at 250 Washington Street here in Auburn. Do we have the applicant, or?
So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. If you want to come sit up here, you're welcome. You could just give your name for the record.
Mary Ellen McDonald on behalf of Equipment East.
Giovanni Albanese on behalf of Equipment East.
Okay. So we have the application in our packets. We see that you've met with the DCG group.
We have, yes.
Okay. All right. Do we have any, do you guys have any presentations, or do you want us to just jump right into it?
I didn't prepare anything. We can certainly answer any questions that you have. If you want us to tell you a little bit about the company, we can certainly do that as well, whatever you prefer.
Any questions, guys? The packet was pretty
Yeah.
self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Gonna be good.
Okay. All right. So with no questions. Do we have any questions from the public? Any comments from the public? No? Had nothing from town administration? No? Okay.
Thank you.
And with that, do we have a motion? I jumped ahead of the gun. Do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do the vote. All right, and with that, do we have a motion?
To
Close.
close it. Make a motion to close the hearing.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. And now do we have a motion for the approval?
I would make a motion to approve the licenses, provided all applicable requirements of the state, town, and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said licenses are subject to all conditions stated upon them. Failure to comply with any and all of the conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void with the conditions of the DCG placed upon the licenses. And the licenses will be issued with the remainder of 2022 and for the year 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. All set, guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Getting, do you want to give Dana a few minutes, or
Might be from here.
from this side? Okay.
It could be.
Okay. Do we want to give Dan a few minutes for this hearing, or?
He said he'd be here between 4 and 5. I guess we can probably start it.
You get it started?
Let's see what other items we take that would be quick. There's a change of vendor and outdoor license for homestead steaks.
Yeah.
If you want to do that, that should be pretty quick.
Okay. Do we have a motion to move up agenda item 5A?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. All right, so we have Homestead Steaks, transient vendor, and outdoor entertainment licenses at the Auburn Mall, 385 Southbridge Street, Auburn, Mass. Do we have the applicant present?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi, how are you? If you could state your name for the record?
My name is Valerie Shore.
Okay. Do you want to?
sorry?
Okay, and do you want to tell us a little bit about the, this license, or what you'll be doing?
Sure. We travel across the West, and we set up like in mall parking lots. We have a temporary lease with the malls. We sell prepackaged frozen USDA food. Our setup is pretty simple. We have a 400 square foot tent and then a 26 foot reefer truck. Everything that we sell is prepackaged, frozen, and it's given to the customer that way. And then we do like live radio remotes with local radio stations to bring foot traffic to the location.
Okay. All right, excellent, thank you. Any questions of the board members?
I noticed on your application, it says that you've been doing this across the country for 15 years. Have you done any locally in Massachusetts?
Actually, this last year we have just started with Massachusetts. The first time we've ever been in the state. So we did Dartmouth and we did Cape Cod, and then this will be the third one.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chambers?
Nope, they're aware of all the rules and it went through planning, so.
Yep, they did go through DCG. We had that in our packets. All right, any questions from the public? Okay, seeing none, town administration?
We're all set, thank you. And they, again, they've gone to DCG, they understand the other requirements, and they're working with the other offices in the town.
All right, with that, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to close the hearing?
No need on this one. It's not a public hearing.
No, okay.
I get tripped up all the time on it too.
So I guess I have to read that then?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I would make a motion that we approve the license provided that all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said licenses are subject to all conditions stated upon it. Failure to comply with any and all of the conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, and with the conditions of the DCG to be placed upon the licenses, and that the licenses will be for the remainder of 2022 and for the year 2023.
A second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. You are all set. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Dan will be able to tell that I tried.
Yes.
All right, we're moving on to agenda item 3A. That is the continued public meeting on Whitney Street Homes Builders LLC for a local initiative project for local housing development at 16 Perry Place.
The chair, if I may also, I just want to hand out to the board some maps that were sent to our town planner this afternoon, and I'm going to send one down for Dan when he gets there. And the developer can explain it, as well as a letter that I received. It was about 5:30 tonight, so sorry it wasn't in your packet. We just got it. Again, also from the developer. So, and I'm sure they'll be able to explain both of this, but I wanted you to have it.
Made it. Makes sense.
So through the chair, if I could then, I know you're still reading some of the letters. I think my recommendation would be the developers are here to present some additional information. I had some questions that I gave to Mr. Benincasa right before the meeting. I had emailed him a couple of questions that I had on the attorney's letter that I know that they can clarify. I'm not an attorney, so you are, maybe you can understand some of it better than I do. But yeah, there were a couple of questions that I had on it that I'm sure the board members would have, but maybe the best thing would be to have you present first.
Okay, so I apologize for the lateness of the letter, but as you can see, we just got it about an hour ago ourselves. And it was only through the prompting that we were coming here tonight and I needed it, that I even got it at all, probably. In any event, the Metropolitan Title did a title research on it, and it appears, although it is a private road and it is not owned by the abutters because the original owners of the property, the Whitaker Irish Perry Realty Trust, reserved the fee in the road when they sold off the lots. And that's something that we do today. But I can say that, you know, I've been developer for, you know, over 40 years, and the first 20 years, we didn't do that. We didn't reserve the right, but over the past 20 years, we've been requested to do that by the towns, is to reserve the fee in the road, and then when we go to, then we can legally deed it to the town when we finish. So somebody was thinking about that all the way back in 1942, which we are shocked, basically, to find that they had done that. So the title company did that research. They come out with that conclusion that the Whitaker Irish Perry Realty Trust owns the road, and that we, as one of the landowners on the property, have the right to improve the road. And that's, you know, as evidenced by this letter here. So that's what that says. I don't know if there's any more discussion on that, or I can just
At
go.
this point, you can keep. Yeah.
Okay, so also, in the meantime, we've completed a traffic study, which you had asked to include additional intersections, which took a little bit more time also, but that has been submitted for your review also. We've revised our impact study, and you have copies of that also. And then in conjunction with that, we have a standing agreement with the water company that we are making a substantial improvement to the water supply backup system to the town, which is the link to the Worcester water system. So we're still agreeing to contribute to that in a substantial way. Other than that, we have met with the fire department, and there's been a number of revisions to the plan, which I'd like our engineer, James Tatro, to explain to you.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, James Tatro from Azimuth Land Design, here for Whitney Street Home Builders. And as the applicant says, we've gone through a couple of iterations of revisions of the concept plan to try and address the concerns enumerated by the fire department. Initially, we made a widening of the main. I'm not going to trace this through on the plan. I could point to something if you really want me to, but if I do, it's a little tough to both trace through on the plan and speak at the same time. But we widened the main aisle in through the site that it comes in and then essentially makes a sort of a teardrop shape that comes back on itself to 30 feet. And we moved some curb lines. We added specific delivery designated spots, added dumpster location, made slight changes to the locations of the proposed garages. Then we got additional feedback from the fire department. We made additional widening to the entrance of the site's access off of Perry Place. And we also committed to, in addition to, we had already proposed to widen Perry Place from Pearl Street up to 24 feet. We also, to address the concern of accessibility during an extreme storm event, agreed that we would bring that road above the 100-year flood elevation, which it varies. Right now, the flood elevation in that area is around or just short of 494. The road varies in elevation from 492 or 492 and change to actually 496 and change. But so there's parts of the road that would be raised to achieve that. And we had a constructive discussion with the fire department actually on Friday. They were kind enough to see us on the day after Thanksgiving. And while nothing is finalized, this is just concept plan and information for the board to make a decision in regard to entering into the LIP agreement. While nothing is finalized, again, we think we're on the road to a solution that would be agreeable to both parties, the fire department and the applicant, and that would achieve reasonable access to the site in the eyes of the department and be reasonable also to the applicant. I take any questions that you have.
Questions of the board members? No? What does raising the road, does that give a benefit? And I really don't know the answer to this question. Does it give a benefit to the homeowners along that road, taking them out of the floodplain?
Right now, again, the worry of the fire department was that, okay, you don't imagine a big fire in the course of, say, a hurricane event, but if there had to be an ambulance call in the course of such an event, and the road is, right now, there's significant stretches of it from Pearl Street up that are under the 100-year floodplain, it might not be accessible right now to the homeowners there. And in the future, that problem would be addressed, would be fixed.
100-year flood is kind of misleading. Do you know how many 100-year floods we've had in the last year or so?
In the last year? We've had none in the last year.
Okay.
But I mean, what there is to go by is the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, puts out flood maps, which in some cases have a calculated elevation for what the flood is at a particular point. In this case, I'm going to go over to the board. So. It's about where I've got the scale behind that smallest building. FEMA has calculated the 100-year flood elevation on the official maps as being elevation 494 in that location. Again, as I say, sections of Perry Place, it's more in front of the power lines than anywhere else, are below 494. And there's a kind of an oddity over where it reaches Pearl Street, where one side of the road is actually at 494 or above, and the other side is a bit below. But the standard reference to which everyone can refer, the FEMA flood maps, say and have calculated that the elevation of the 100-year flood in this location is essentially 494. And the applicant would raise the driving surface of Perry Place above that so that we could ensure that there would be access to the development in the future, and obviously it would serve also the existing homes.
So approximately 1 foot higher than what it currently is.
It varies, but probably the greatest elevation difference is just short of 2 feet. There's low points where it's 492 and change that would have to be raised up to just over 494. So you could say essentially 2 feet at the most.
No further questions? The water tie-in, I still fail to understand the benefit to the surrounding residents. You guys obviously need water to your project, which you're coming in with those, with that Worcester line. It's one of the districts that serves Auburn already. Am I misunderstanding that? I mean, or is there going to be backup water to the residents?
It's a benefit actually it's a benefit to everyone actually in the town. It's not even specific to this part of town. What the water district tells us, and we had a long meeting with their board, is that right now they have effectively no backup. And if one of their primary pumps went out, either from some sort of malfunction or, they're pumping sufficient water, but if somehow the water it was pumping suddenly was found to have an unacceptable level of some contaminant, maybe arsenic or something that you actually see in the ground, then the town actually would be in a position where it's uncertain that flow and pressure could be maintained throughout the site. And the benefit of the connection to the city, possible connection to the city of water system that a previous project is providing part of the funding for, and this project would provide also funding for, is that in such an instance, the town would be able to access connection to the Worcester water system, and they could also potentially pull one of their existing pumps offline. I don't know the age or condition of them, but if they decided that, geez, this particular one right beside 290 has got a lot of miles on it, we'd really like to change this one out. Right now, they're actually in a difficult position in trying to do so. But in the future, with this possibility of connection, they would have reserve and backup and be able to make connections, and they wouldn't be in such a somewhat precarious position in regard to supply. So it's not simply for the water connection for the potential development at 16 Perry Place, or, you know, the folks in the area, other, you know, the other residents there, or Pearl Street, et cetera. It's actually really for the entire town is what the water district is looking at. And the applicant is committed to making a significant funding and contribution towards that.
I spoke with Greg Woods. It's what he was saying, that if even, you know, one was contaminated, or, you know, I guess there's a well that's near the highway. He said if something ever happened where a car went off there or hit that, shut that well down, then we would have an issue supplying the town with water. So what they would do then is obviously they could go to this connection, turn the water on, and basically feed the town the water from Worcester in case of an emergency. It's not there, you know, to run all the time to provide to everybody, but it's in case of emergency, the town will be able to have a backup that would do that.
So this connection does not directly affect us. It helps us as it helps every other person in the town. So it's not necessary for us to do, but it's something that we want to do. The other developer of the other project had done it, and we're agreeable to do the same.
And this is a project that was already slated to happen, obviously not with your donation to it.
So
we don't have
my
the water department to really, I guess, to town administration, that would be an offset to residents' costs, because that
Probably
cost
to
of the
the,
project
to the
would-
user. Yeah, that would be my understanding. As you said, my understanding is the project is going to proceed probably in a couple of years. If the developer contributes to the project earlier than that, then the project can probably take place earlier. So that would expedite your project as well, correct? Okay.
Cost benefit. Okay.
And just so I can ask you, so if the project, if you didn't contribute to the water, what's the impact on your project then? Is it just a timing issue? Ultimately, you'd still be able to hook into the water? Is that what
We're proposing to a 40B, and as you know, we can go both ways. We could go conventional, we could go a lip. This is part of it. We're looking to do a lip project. It's a little smoother, less cumbersome from us, and let's face it, a friendly 40B sounds a lot better than an unfriendly 40B. So we'd like to see if we can proceed with the friendly 40B, and this is just one of the benefits that the town would get as part of a friendly 40B. So that's our first choice, and we're going to try real hard to do that.
Okay. And no further comment? No? Do we have any public comment? Yeah, if you could just, is it okay if we let them take the podium? So anybody who wants to make public comment, if you could just come to the podium, give your name and address for the record. I do want to just make sure, just for clarity, I've been asking questions of the developer, trying to focus on what the benefit here, how we can offset the costs, because that's what they're offering. That's what this friendly 40B is at the end of the day. It's how can we offset the cost or the impact of this project to the local residents, okay? There's no vote that can be taken on this board here today that would stop this project. It's, do we want to go friendly 40B on the LIP, or do they want to go directly to the state for approval? So I just want to make that known before comments are made with any assumptions that we could deny this project here tonight.
I just have a question about when you raise the road for flood level, what is it going to do to the adjacent properties? Is it going to flow into our property or into the wetlands? Because right now we're on that level, we're just on the corner of it. And I had to go through a whole bunch of FEMA stuff to get to not be in a flood zone. Are you going to put me back in a flood zone?
Can I ask who she is and where she lives?
Oh, I'm sorry, name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry, Patricia German, 12 Pearl Street.
Pearl.
I spent a lot of money to get out of the flood zone, and I don't want to be put back in it by raising the road and having all that water flow
And
into it.
are we affecting Pearl Street at the raising of the road at all?
I don't believe so, but what actually is going to happen here is that in addition to raising the road, we're going to install multiple culverts through this, so that the water passes just as much as it did before. There's not going to be we're not going to dam water behind this. I'm trying to think of who would, I guess, number 4, Perry Place is the only house who's sort of behind the road, if you will. You know, I mean, if we dammed the road, you'd be, I guess you'd say you'd be drier. But we're going to install culverts to just replicate the condition of passage of water now. So this will be above the water, but there will be culverts so that everything goes through no differently than now.
Further public comment?
Tim Daly, 25 Rockland Road. I just have a question. The woman before from the conservation, from the watershed, she said that they were borrowing water from another community. So if we're going to be taking water to help us, how are Worcester's going to just say, okay? Doesn't make any sense. Did I understand her correctly?
You did.
Okay.
Earlier, the Blackstone project, you said they had to purchase water. Their reservoirs got low at one point, and how does that affect intermunicipal?
So if the water's low in Worcester, and then we're putting in this project, we're going to be taking, Worcester's not going to want to give us water if they don't have water.
I can't speak to that as an expert in the field.
Okay.
I do believe that a lot of these things are required by the state.
I did hear her correctly, though, right?
You did.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know.
So that would be the water department working with the city, the water department being a separate body. So, Mr. Largess?
Any Largess, 39 Perry Place. There's a lot of questions. How are we going to get 30 feet out of Perry Place? So you have the condos on one side, you have wetlands on the other side, you have Mr. Bolivar at number 4, you have the power lines. Are we just going to like take the condominiums properties? Didn't you just say you're going to extend the road width 30 feet?
I said we widened the road within our development to 30 feet.
Within your development, oh, sorry. So all of these vehicles that you gave us, I believe it was 1.6 vehicles per unit, times 157 times leaving their house 7 times a day. If I'm not mistaken, those were your figures. Up and down Perry Street, Perry Place, Pearl Street, Rockland Road, Highland Street. Where are all of these cars going to go at that road width that is maximum 21 feet wide? Do we not need sidewalks, berms, drainage? What's going to happen in the wintertime when the snow flies and the road narrows down from 16 feet down to 12 feet? When we have to pull into our neighbors' driveways to get by? I'm sure, you know, the condominiums and Mr. Bolivar and Mr. Downer don't want to give up their property so somebody else can line their pockets. I'm just kind of, when I talked to the Worcester Registry of Deeds, they were the ones who told us we all own to the center of the road. So now we have a discrepancy. Just things to take care of. Fire engines.
Mr. Largess, could we just take it one
Well,
part of a time?
Mr. Chairman, it's still the road. I mean, how are we going to drop 10 pounds of crap into a 5-pound bag?
The ZBA would be peer reviewing any of the traffic or any of the road work as part of this project, but it's not something that we would really have any authority to really make any rulings on here tonight.
Okay, it's just, my main concern is a safety issue, and raising the road the 2 feet again, people's properties are gonna flood. You're gonna raise Perry Place 2 feet. Where's the water gonna go? Right down towards Pearl Street, down that way. Number 12 Pearl Street is right across the street. If that's not maintained, Perry Street, not Perry Place, floods over into the air yard on heavy rains. When the snow flies, bless you, when the snow flies, the streets are narrow. Their yard gets worse again. You know, raising the road, the water's got to go somewhere. It really, there's no, it's a fact. It's an act of God, you know, the rain's going to come down, it's got to go. So these are
Mr.
just.
Lodges is concerned about the drainage as we are. So when we do our drainage study and your peer reviews it, that'll be the final word on it. It won't be our word. It won't be anybody's word. It'll be the engineers.
It'll be the engineers that
Yes, sir.
state what the water impact is. And all
We
that.
recognize it's an important point, and we thank you for bringing that up, sir. Thank you.
I think I both touched everything.
Thank you. Any further public comment? No? We're talking about the entirety of the project at this point. That's fine.
Okay, Tim Daly, 25 Rockland Road. Thank you for letting me speak this evening. And several years ago, the bridge on Southbridge Street was repaired. And all the traffic was detoured through the industrial park onto Rockland Road, to Auburn Street, to Weathered Street. And if anybody that remembers, it was a disaster. We couldn't get out of our driveways on Rockland Road because of the traffic, because you couldn't get out onto Auburn Street. So I think that this whole project is going to be the same way, and if not even worse. There's going to be more traffic. Now you're talking 700 cars maybe. I don't know. I just don't think this project belongs in this neighborhood. Perry Street, Pearl Street, Highland Street, Weathered Street, they're much smaller roads, and I can see that coming out of Perry Place, they would look for shortcuts instead of waiting in line at the end of Perry or Pearl. So they would come up Highland, right onto Weathered, left onto Auburn, and then they'd sit there. We get stuck, you know, just about every morning. So I think that's going to be a big problem with adding all these cars. So I guess I see as a potential that we're not only damaging 2 neighborhoods, but now we're damaging 4. We're hurting Perry, we're hurting Pearl, we're hurting Highland, Weathered. It's a lot bigger than I think people realize. And I don't think the roads can handle that much of a stress. There was a question at the last meeting, which was a month ago, about this, and I believe it was asked to you about the Conservation Committee, and I think your answer was, the Conservation Committee has no problem with me. I believe that was a direct quote, and I'm just telling you what I heard. That was the Conservation Committee had no problem. And then I started to look, and I saw a letter of intent on August 11th, 2021, to build a single-family home that is nowhere near the wetlands. It's nowhere near any of the areas that we're talking about for this project. So I guess the Conservation Committee could be happy with you because there's no controversy. There's no problem. You never really answered the question about this project in the Conservation Committee. You answered another question. I was able to obtain some of the statistics regarding the student enrollment from the school department. At this current time, Packagug School is near capacity, Bryn Mawr School is near capacity, Swanton Road School is near capacity, and the high school is near capacity. But I'm not sure any of you really care about any of that. You care about building, finishing, and leaving. And we, the taxpayers, will be left with a mess. The possibility of school additions, new and improved roads, additional police, fire, and EMT personnel, and the equipment that goes with those jobs will have to be affected. The $450,000 that has been discussed for additional revenue to the town will not make a dent will not make a dent in the town. And we will end up being in pretty bad shape, I think. So I guess not to take it personal, but I think I would like you to have you take your plans and your ideas and go to another town, find a town that cares, and think that they can do it.
Okay, any further public comment? Okay. Do you have any further questions?
Yeah, through the chair, I think it would be helpful for the residents that are here, as well as the board, to understand what you're being asked to vote on tonight. You're not being asked to vote on supporting this project. This project is either a conventional 40B or an LIP, which is a local initiative project, which is a so-called friendly 40B. So I think and we've talked about it too, I think the important thing is for the board and the residents to understand what happens under the LIP. If the board were to say, we approve an LIP, we will work with you to mitigate the impacts. If you could just repeat again what the benefits would be. If the board didn't go with an LIP and you went with a conventional 40B, what would you be doing or not doing? So just if you could be clear, because I think the residents need to understand that the vote tonight isn't going to stop the project. I don't believe the state will take into consideration impact on the schools or impact on police and fire. That's my understanding, that they don't unfortunately take that into effect because there is a cost to the town, which is why under an LIP, the town looks to partner with a developer to try to mitigate the impacts somehow. So if you could explain to the board and for the public to understand what you would do under the LIP versus what you would or would not do if it went a conventional 40B and what that process is. Does that make sense?
So I live out in a little further east of here, and the state enacted a 40B, I'm thinking it was 20 years ago or so. And when they did enact that, major developers, large hedge funds and pension funds had come into the state, and they've been building 40Bs from Boston out. They filled up Westboro. They probably built 700,000 or 800,000 units in Westboro, which is a town that I lived in. They built in Shrewsbury. They finished up Northborough. Northborough has, I think, 13% affordable housing. So all those towns to the east have already gotten their 10% plus. Auburn hasn't got it because it's not on their radar screen. They're filling up. So this is not unique to Auburn. This is just, it's coming in line. It's coming from the east, going to the west. So part of the 40B process, the state had asked, has enabled us to do a LIP project, which is where we get a letter of support from the selectmen, which goes through a little bit different process. But in lieu of that, there is another process where we can go and deal directly with the state. And I don't like to say that we would not be making any of those contributions, but we're not obligated to make those contributions. We're not obligated to connect to the water. There is enough water. There is enough water in Auburn to service the residents of Auburn. So what they're talking about, Auburn Water Department is looking for an emergency source, a source in case there was an incident, which is, it's a good thing. I don't know what the water is. No one here that's a water expert here, and I don't profess to be one of any of these studies here, but they seem to think that that's very important. And so they're pursuing it, and it's something that it's going to cost millions and millions of dollars. So the other developer of the other 40B, that's when the town is making a major contribution. He's got a project that's probably twice the size, so it's making more of a contribution. But with his contribution and our contribution, from what I understand, and I don't want to be quoted on it, it appears as though that's going to make the connection, which is important to the town. We're not obligated to do that. We're not obligated to follow, to work and take direction from the planning board and from the fire department and from the police department. We're obligated to build a project that does not create any public safety issues. Now, the difference between building a project that doesn't have any safety issues and the project that some of the department heads in Auburn would ideally like to have could be substantially different. I don't know if it is or not, but it could be. That will be vetted out through the process. So it's a good idea. We've worked with a number of other towns. They seem to think it's good. I know that Westboro, when they were working with Avalon and Criterion, those other major developers, they did lit projects out there. I think it's a smart thing to do. It does take some political whim because nobody wants a development in their backyard. Literally no one. And literally, it happens. There's not a project that we do, no matter what kind of project it is, that we get support from the abutters. But I can tell you, the people that move into them are really happy living there. And when we drive in afterwards, into these developments, so this is gonna be 25% affordable housing, which is gonna be, it's not Section 8 housing, where they're paying $200 a night, a month. This is affordable housing, which is, I think it's and again, don't quote me exactly, it's about $1,500 for a one-bedroom. This is considered more workforce housing. This is where your teachers and your firefighters and your municipal employees might choose to live there. This is something that we're allowed to give preference to Auburn residents, people that work in Auburn, to the letter of the law that we're allowed to do that. We have to follow strict guidelines. This is another benefit to the town for housing. Housing is important. Housing is important. I know housing's unpopular when it's in your neighborhood, but in general, housing is critical. We all live in houses. We all need houses. Houses need to, it's a major part of the economy. It's a major part of our standard of living. It's important. And there's a lack of housing in Massachusetts, and this is helping to fill that need. So we want to work with the town of Auburn as we're working with town of Millbury, we're working with town of Boylston, we're working with town of Shrewsbury, we're working with the town of Sutton. I mean, they're all opting to go with the LIP process. And so we're amenable to do that. We want to do that. We want to be a good neighbor. We want to build a good project. We're not building this project and leaving. My intentions are to build this and own this, as we've done these other projects. This will be, if this is approved now, this will be my 6th one. So it's not my first one. I've been a builder 45 years. I've been around a lot. I've never filed bankruptcy. I've been building a good product, housing product, my whole life. So the fact that I don't live in Auburn, but I don't live that far away. It's not like I'm from out of state or from another area that doesn't care. I care. And so we'd like to be a good neighbor. We'd like to go to project in your town.
I think, Julie, your question was, what would the difference be whether, we went with the LIP or, directly to the state? I think the state would dictate exactly what we would be doing for the community, what they would find to be, suitable for the road, for the public safety. It would be what the state says, where as a LIP project, us coming in here, we're working with the community to say, what does the community think? So a lot of the times we're doing above and beyond what the state believes is adequate to we're going to what the town does. So like you said, the select board, isn't necessarily, they're not approving this as the project, but they're just approving that they will work with us and we can work together to come up with a better project for the community. Because I think, like you've said in the past, the community will move forward really in one way or the other.
So I guess my question, a couple of questions then, thanks, because that does clarify it a little bit better. So from what you were saying earlier, you had conversations with the fire department, and the fire department right now is, the fire chief's here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the fire chief and the department were comfortable with the solutions that you proposed to some of the issues that they raised, but if this didn't go forward as a LIP, would you still be doing some of those enhanced fire safety measures?
I think at that point, then we'd be going to the state to see what the state would think would be required. So it may or may not. It's, it's kind of it's a hard question. And as far as our meetings, we met mostly with Jake Nunemacher, and he was great. He was very helpful. We had a good back and forth. There was things that he was asking that we were, obviously responding to. Again, we're not done yet. There's still a lot of work that we will need to do with the zoning board and, moving forward. But we've had a good communication back and forth. And there's nothing that I felt in the meeting that was, a sticking point on either side. I don't want to put, obviously any words in Jake's mouth. And I think that, he, again, didn't approve anything. There's nothing set in stone, but we have a good, dialogue going.
Yeah, I think in our negotiations with him, we've agreed to do things which we believe are above and beyond what would be required.
Yes.
So just to make that clear, we believe it's above and beyond what the state would approve.
And through the chair, I believe my conversation with the fire chief is similar to that he did believe that what's being proposed for certain fire safety measures are above and beyond what would be required under the state.
Things like raising that road, the 100-year flood, it hasn't flooded last year, and it probably didn't flood the year before, but the federal government seems to think that the FEMA line is important and that you can't do things in that line and that it will flood someday, and when it does happen, whether it's tomorrow or whether it's 10 years from now, if that could create a safety issue, and that's an issue that exists out there today that's going to be rectified as part of this process. Now, if we don't do this project, if we didn't do this project, would anyone else be willing to step up and raise that road a foot? I don't think that would be happening. You've got a situation there that is a potential safety issue. It's a potential safety issue. It's not a safety issue today, it's not, and it may not happen in our lifetime, or it may happen in a lifetime. But it's determined to be, according to federal government, it's important.
Through the chair, thank you. I had a couple more questions. So if you didn't move forward and make the contributions to the water department, would you be able to connect to water now versus when that project is done?
We believe we can connect to the water department because it's not, I don't believe, and I don't believe that the town has the right, or the water department has the right to deny a 40B based on public services if the services do exist. If that was the case, every town would do that every place. So it would be an easy way to stop a 40B, so it's really not allowed.
And thank you. And then my other question, and almost to a point that one of the residents raised with regard to the title search. So I guess you answered some of my questions earlier, but my question is, so it's interesting. The letter came and said that the property owners, the title company found the property owners don't own to the center point of the line. And I know under the law in Massachusetts, there's either 3, if not 4 different types of public roads. So that clearly isn't the more popular or common type of road if they don't own to the center. Not everyone does, because a lot of times they retain the fee interest. So again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm trying to read this as an attorney, but does that mean that were those rights conveyed to you as the owner of 16 Perry Place to do the improvements, or who actually now has those rights? The fee, I guess the legal term is, who has the fee interest? It is the company, the Whitaker Irish Perry Realty Company has the rights. Owns the road.
But everyone that lives on the road, is a butter to the road, has the right to improve the road. Not just us, any resident that lives on that road.
And does any resident have the right to improve the entire road versus the portion that they just own? Or is it because it's a fee interest, they technically don't own any portion of it, so they could make a decision to improve one end versus the other?
And anyone that, so the way the law is written, and I'm not a lawyer, so from what I've been told, is that anyone that abuts a private road has the right to improve the road. Similar if you lived on a road and a private road and you got a big washout and no one was fixing the washout, so say there's 4 houses on the road, but 3 of them were abandoned, and when you lived on that road and you wanted to fix that road so that you could pass there, well, the other 3 people don't care about passing through there, so you would have the right to repair that road so that you could pass on the road. So how it affects you, if the road became in disrepair and you couldn't pass and repass, then everyone on there has that right to do that. Otherwise than that, if any neighbors didn't get along, they could say, no, you can't do it, no, you can't do it. Everyone has the right to improve the road.
Thank you. And then I think I just want to be clear. So this letter did confirm that the road is private, that the abutters along that road are private. So if the abutters along that road believe legally that you, as the owner of 16 Perry Place, doesn't have the legal right, that would be a civil matter. That's not anything that the town can get involved in. That's a civil matter. our town council would not be able to weigh in on that because, again, this is clear that it is private property. We all assumed it was private property. Our deed research showed that it was private property as well. But if there is a dispute between the private property owners, that's something that has to be taken up as a civil matter, correct? Okay.
Like I said, the town would want to necessarily, or there'll be a civil thing.
Is Whitaker still around?
We just got this letter an hour ago ourselves.
I know.
Say, yeah.
It was kind of the same thing. It was a shock to all of us. We were like, wait, who is this company?
Yeah.
So we don't.
A lot of times you get like a street, it's just, the town doesn't take it over, rights aren't reserved, everyone owns the center line. This is kind of unique where Whitaker did reserve the fee to the streets, but they gave a right of way to all the residents,
Right.
which they would have given anyway had they not reserved the right.
Yes.
But that fee right could technically be with Whitaker. But again, I'm not here as an attorney tonight. That's
Well, they can't sell a lot to someone and then deny them access.
Right.
So you're right.
it's just interesting the way that it went, the way they did it.
I was surprised myself.
All right, we do have, we're a little bit out, I know we're going back and forth, but I've held the residents off because we wanted to get this information, so I don't want to cut them off tonight. So we do have 2 more public comments, which I'll allow. Give your name and address for the record.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kevin German. I live at 12 Pearl Street in Auburn. Thanks for letting us come up and speak to you again. If my memory serves right, we did have that flood not too long ago, maybe a little over 10 years ago. And if you drove down the street, you saw everybody's pumps coming out of the first floor because their basements were entirely full. And they were pumping, trying to get the water out of the first floor. And when your basement floods, insurance companies like, nope, we do not, we're not responsible for anything under the first floor. So what's in there? Your furnace, and maybe it's fixed up, family room, maybe a bedroom, maybe a spare apartment. So we did have that flood, and it wasn't good. We experienced it. And in order to stop a play by insurance companies to make us pay maybe $400 to $600 extra a month for flood insurance, which they would not cover anything in the basement for. You have to get stuff into the first floor before they say, okay, we'll give you 50% of whatever it is. Where I live, we spent $8,000 worth of dirt on our lot so we could have the house up higher than would have been if we had just put it in there. And that was okay, and we still flooded out. Not as badly as some other people, and strangely, people at a high elevation right next to us, their entire basement flooded. We had less than an entire basement flood. So my question is, with raising the road and the runoff, if it doesn't happen the way he predicts, what are our protections? What is the mechanism for us to come to you and say, what happened? Do we have to go through all this legal stuff now because our property has been flooded? What if he's wrong about that? What happens to our properties? We don't know what's going to happen. We know there's going to be a lot more traffic and all that stuff, but I know he said he's going to go up and above, and I don't even want to really comment on that because I think that's kind of like, it's a touchy subject, and it has not happened in previous places. Am I not correct, sir, Mr. Benincasa?
What was the question?
It said, when you said you wanted to go up and above, I didn't really want to open the can of worms.
Yeah, direct questions to me if you could.
Okay, yeah. Well, he just looked at me and so I started. So, thanks. So I was just wondering what our protections are in an instance where what this whole project said it was going to be is detrimental to the property owners in the area.
That would, again, all those drainage calculations get basically handled by the engineers with peer review at later stages in the construction. So it's really hard for me to sit here and give you an answer of a what if, especially on land that you're already saying is flooding. So with the raising a foot, we're making an assumption that it's making it worse if we're raising the road by a foot. Whereas clearly the builder's making a statement and an assumption that it'll make it better with the other drainage that'll be on the alongside the road as well. So I'd have to just say the engineers. I don't know if any town administration or if anybody has a better answer than that, but
Say it would be peer reviewed by our engineering company when it gets to the ZBA level for the comprehensive permit. Through the chair, the town planner just.
there's an expert.
So it will get reviewed by our engineers at the time that the plans are submitted. As not only will they review the engineering work, but they also look at the traffic study that's been submitted and do a peer review of that as well at that point.
I was just curious if there was a vehicle for people where they could go to and say, hey, it didn't turn out like they said, we're flooding, and we didn't flood before because we made precautions and stuff like that. But we went to Senator Scott Brown to help us, and he helped us out a great deal, thanks to my wife filling out 2,000-3,000 pages of really great, exciting point paperwork. But we got it done. Otherwise, we would have been forced to pay for insurance that was not going to cover us. It's doesn't really make sense for us to do that. So we want to be protected, and you're the ones who can do it. And this is an absolute David and Goliath situation. And the people, the heart of Auburn are sitting here, and we're hoping that you will have us in your best interest when you make all these decisions and recommendations, because we're the ones who are affected by essentially a drop and run building plan. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Largess?
Just, town resident just reached out to me, and first of all these meetings that he's saying he's having with the different boards are hearsay unless these board members are here. I mean, I can say, hey, I met with God last week, and God told me I'm going to hit the lottery next week.
Danny, this isn't a courtroom.
No. But what I'm saying is so it's all. I mean, I'd love to hear from the water department. I'd love to hear, what the fire department is saying. But also, a town resident just reached out and said the town of Auburn already has 2 to 3 connections to the city of Worcester for emergency purposes only. So is this third one that I believe the builder on Route 20 was going to pay the whole thing for really going to be a great ordeal for the town of Auburn? And my second part of that is we heard they did traffic studies, but we didn't hear the outcome of the traffic studies. I'd love to hear. Anybody else want to hear the traffic studies? I'd love to hear these traffic studies. And I'd also like to see the updated map, copies of the updated map for some of the residents here. But those are the couple things. And like I said, 2 to 3 connections for emergency right now in the town of Auburn, and the traffic studies. We'd love to see them if we could get copies of them.
Not to make light of your comments, but you realize what you did was literally hearsay, right?
It's all hearsay. Everything's hearsay. Hey, my meeting with God the other day told me I'm going to hit the lottery. It's hearsay.
All right. I'm sorry, you said good.
Yeah, I just want to repeat, the Board of Selectmen does not review the traffic studies. That is done by a peer engineer that is paid for by the developer when they get to the ZBA. That's not done here. So this is not the body that reviews a traffic study of any project.
No, I understand that, Ms. Manager. But we would like to hear them.
And
he said they completed them.
Through the chair, he did not say that. We asked what the process is. So just to repeat, they have not yet filed with the ZBA. That comes after this process. Right now, they're trying to determine if this is a so-called friendly 40B, where the town works with them to try to mitigate some of the impacts. And then the project moves forward through the phases, which will involve, they have to go back to the...
Keep it quiet in the back.
They have to go back to the Conservation Commission. And they also, they have to go back to the Conservation Commission, and they will have to file at the ZBA. The question here tonight before the board is whether they're filing an LIP or they're doing a traditional 40B, which would mean that the process is a little different depending on which they do. They have not gone through those boards yet. So that might have been a misunderstanding that you have, but the developers never said that they've gone through that. They did go through and file, as one of the residents found, they did file for a single family with the Conservation Commission, and we had actually reached out to the Conservation Commission to see if they had come back yet with the revised plan, which they had not. That is a step that they have to do. They recognize that. At the last meeting, they acknowledged that they have to go back to the Conservation Commission. So they haven't done that for this project, and they will be filing with the ZBA, and that's where the engineering studies get reviewed, whether it's the water, the connection, the drainage, the stormwater, or the traffic study. That will all be peer reviewed at that time. So at that time, those are public meetings. The public is welcome to go. The residents are welcome to go, but this board doesn't do that review.
We did look for traffic initially because it's no secret that this could be a tough spot where it is. I mean, that was a concern from this board from day one. But again, it's literally not ripe yet for review, nor do we have jurisdiction necessary to look at traffic studies with any kind of authority, so.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Talking about traffic studies and you're not jumping in. All right, do we have any further comments to be made? Any further, yes, Mr. Chambers.
So if we were to enter into the LIP, is it safe to say that you would build better and provide resolution with the peer review comments provided on those plans? Would you take those, or would you say, yeah, peer review, don't care? Or would you take those comments and work for a resolution for the improvement? Or do you just say, you know what, the LIP's not worth it, go the traditional route?
In the question, sorry.
Yep, so if we vote on the LIP and you go through the process and we get comments back from peer review, it's your intention to resolve those comments or make it better than what is required? Is that?
We're definitely going to resolve the peer review. That's part of the process. We absolutely, if the peer review finds that our drainage is deficient or our traffic study is deficient or any other items that are deficient in the peer review, we will negotiate and resolve that. It isn't all black and white. It's not, and it may be going above and beyond what the bylaws and things are as it typically does. So, we're agreeing to do more than the minimum. We're agreeing to work with the town in a better light.
I think maybe the question, so if are you asking basically what would be the difference if we went through the state or if we went through, worked with the town through the 40B? So I think the thing is, obviously, if we went directly to the state, it would take us a little bit longer. It would cost a little bit more. Instead of doing that, we would obviously work with the town and be able to give the town a little bit more. It looks better for us, going through the state to do that. So we're able to give the town more going through a LIP process.
So, but then for your recourse, if there were some comments that came back that you didn't necessarily agree with, you're not beholden to them, or you could, on your side, withdraw the LIP and go a traditional route.
That would be a ZBA decision. They have more authority when it comes to health and safety.
I'm just trying to think if we're going to do that, how willing to go above the minimums are they?
Well, that's all so theoretical. I don't know if it's really appropriate that I can even answer that.
I think that obviously we could have done that right out of the gate, right? We could have went directly to the state. We're here. We're obviously trying to work with the towns, the boards, and everybody. So, we're showing that we do want to work with the town. So I guess the question, just we want to obviously go through the LIP process. We're not looking to bypass it and just go around. Is the option there and available? Yes, it is. But obviously, as us being here and doing this for for months now. I think that, demonstrates that we
The fact
are.
that you're doing a lip does not negate the obligation of us to address the peer review comments.
Right.
Through the chair, so if we agree, then it still has the process to go through. But again, we don't have that jurisdiction over all these things so we're not negotiating it, but we're just saying we're agreeing to proceed with a lip, but then all authority for that lip and negotiation takes place outside of this board, correct?
With the zoning board of appeals.
Zoning Board of Appeals.
With the ZBA, with department heads, and again, they've proposed things already based on negotiations from the fire department, offering the water with the raised road. So I would imagine those would continue throughout. They're not going to be stated here and then taken back before they get to the ZBA stage. Follow up?
Yeah, I'm just, so again, it doesn't reside with us per se, but I'm not, again, it's all theoretical, but if ZBA has an issue, does the lip prevent them from negotiating further or requiring or requesting things? So does the lip put the ZBA in a...
As far as I know, it takes nothing away from the ZBA.
Town administration have, is that correct?
That is my understanding, that the process still has to go to the ZBA through the comprehensive permit process. So the comprehensive permit process is driven by Mass General Law. That doesn't change. My understanding is the only thing that changes with the LIP is that the town, whether it be the fire department, the DPW, anyone else, gets the opportunity to negotiate and work with the developer to try to mitigate some of the impacts that we see, versus the process that goes through without an LIP. The town would have no input. The town would not be able to say, we'd like to see the road widened. We'd like to see the road raised. We'd not like to see the road widened. We wouldn't have any ability to have those conversations at all. And ZBA will still have to go through their process regardless of the vote that you take.
We're still required to do a project that has no life safety issues, bottom line. The question is, how far beyond that, would we be required to go? And with the LIP process, there is more latitude for the town to negotiate with us. It keeps you in the game.
And that's why I was trying to kind of solidify here, what is the town going to get by entering into a LIP? And what tangible benefits are there to the town for doing that versus letting you just go through the process? And I have to say the developer has worked with us. They've worked a lot with the fire department. They've spent the better part of the last 6 weeks working with the fire department to try to mitigate some of the concerns that the fire department had. But that's why tonight we were just trying to let everybody know what is it exactly that the town would benefit if you take this vote. And if the board doesn't take this vote, what does the town lose out on? And I think you've made that clear. I don't mean for you to repeat it.
And we're not done working with the town. We've just started. So there's a lot of meetings yet to happen. There's a lot of decisions to be made. The ZBA is the permitting authority that will be working.
So through the chair, the benefit I've heard tonight was water connection.
That's the major one. That's substantial. That's a strong six-figure number. Strong, almost a seven-figure number.
Are there other direct, and I know there's negotiation, but are there other things that you're?
There's road improvements. There's improvements that we've agreed to do with the fire department that we believe is above and beyond what would be required from the state, what we've agreed to do. The road itself, it's not a final design. We would like to work with either your DPW or your planning board and decide, what is the best design of Perry Road? What is the best alternative? And I'm sure we're going to be getting a lot of feedback from the neighbors, from the DPW, from the planning board. So we're happy to work with that. You could say that road, what is the minimum that road needs to be, public safety, versus what does the town want to have to that road, bottom line. It could be a substantial difference, and I don't know what that is, but it could be.
There's a lot of decisions that get made along the way.
There is.
All right, one last public comment. I saw a gentleman had his hand up.
Steve, I believe more or less asked the question. I was just wondering whether the LIB would be binding, is it a contract, or basically you have the ability to do what the state guidelines are? Is that what you're following is the state guidelines, or is it actually the LIB what's binding and
Gotcha.
then we're voting on it?
That's a great question, sir. A LIP requires, if the board were to vote to approve of the LIP, it requires the chairman of the board, authorized by a vote of the entire board, to sign as a co-applicant to the state for the project. And then the application actually specifies what work is going to be done and exactly what's going to happen. So to give you an example, the Board of Selectmen did vote for an LIP for the Blaker Street project with Eastland Partners. And that was a project that the board signed off on it. Right in the pro forma that was attached to the application to the state was the list of what the expenditures were going to be by the developer. And in that list, it included a $500,000 donation to the town, which they had pre-negotiated with us that we could use it for a variety of things to help the community. It hasn't been finally determined yet because the money hasn't come in yet. The project hasn't received the building permits yet. But the town is so-called a co-applicant on an LIP. If the board does not, so that is a legal document. We are supporting, if it's voted, the town would be supporting the project as outlined in the application. So before the application was signed, the board would need to see what's in the application, what is the project, what are they doing? And that has to go, forgive me if I'm wrong, that has to go after the ZBA process, or you have to get that into the state first, then the state.
Before.
So it goes before. Then the state, once you get an LIP, it gets submitted to the state. The state comes out, they do a site visit, and they determine whether the project can proceed to the next step. They give a notice to proceed, an NTP, to the developer, who then goes and starts the process for the comprehensive permit at the ZBA. So that's kind of how the process works.
Any question, Mr. Crane?
Todd Corain, 121 Hampton Street, and I just want to be clear from the front, I'm speaking for myself and not related to any position I may hold in the town or my professional career. My question is, as the town manager just said, the town, if it votes this favorably, signs that application committing you to support this project before it goes through the ZBA process. Now, you said tonight you don't know if the stormwater works. You don't know if the traffic works. You don't know if the water works. What are you basing your decision on in supporting this? If you don't know if any of this works and you're saying, I'm deferring that to the ZBA, but you're signing a letter committing the town to support this before it even goes through that process. Now, in my experience, typically when similar towns put through these, the local support letters and sign on, they at least have commitment letters from town staff and potentially peer review saying that in their professional opinion, the fire department believes it, that what's been discussed back and forth is safe and can move forward and with extra work and talking. Police departments typically says the same thing, DPW, engineering, transportation. The town staff typically provides that. Has the town staff at Auburn provided that to you, saying that they are comfortable with everything that's been provided to date, that the select board should sign, the selectmen should sign off on this to support this project, and the rest of the details will be hashed out through the ZBA process? Because if not, I don't understand exactly what you're basing your decision on.
Through the chair, again, I don't mean to repeat again, but this is the process that's been set out by the state. I agree, it's an odd process, so the board has to make a decision before it goes to the ZBA. That's the law. So we have to follow the law. So the choices before us here are making a decision based on the information that the board has before them now, or not getting involved in any of this, and the project goes forward on its own without the Board of Selectmen. The only decision the Board of Selectmen can make is based on, that's why we keep repeating ourselves, what are we getting from doing this? What is the benefit? What is the developer providing to us? That's what the board makes their decision on. The ZBA is going to make their decision based on everything else. We don't do the peer review. The peer review isn't done until it gets to that level. So the state is asking the town to co-apply for a project if the town believes that they want to support the project and they believe that they're going to get a benefit from doing so. If there's no benefit for doing so, which is why I think Mr. Chambers is asking, we've all been asking, what is the benefit? If the Board of Selectmen determines there is no benefit, then the Board of Selectmen likely wouldn't go forward and vote for an LIP. It's not stopping the project. It's making the project go a different route. So as much as we'd like to answer your questions, I can tell you it's been to DCG, which is our development coordinating group. It's we've had conversations with the water department, we've had conversations with the DPW, we've had conversations with the fire department. Whatever has been asked over time, the developer has provided to us. At this point, we are not the engineers to review the traffic study that's been presented or what we found out literally this afternoon about the proposal for the drainage and the raising of the road. So the fire department has been involved. They were comfortable. I use the word comfortable. They don't approve. They were comfortable with what was presented. And they believe that if there is no LIP and the developer goes forward on a 40B as a conventional 40B, that some of those measures that they're proposing to take aren't going to be taken. So they were comfortable with the additional measures. As far as letters, I've never seen a letter written. We didn't do that last time. The board is making their decision based on what the developer is hopefully committing to tonight, which is why we keep pressing, what are you committing to? What will we get? And that's what the board makes their decision. Then it has to follow the process. I wish the law was the reverse. I wish the law allowed the town to determine whether they were going to partner or not until after it went through the process, but that's not how Chapter 40B works.
Again, it's just not ripe. We need to take on good faith their propositions, which will be signed off on with the LIP. But we can't go on full hire engineers and consultants and peer review every piece of this project. When we know a project this size, there's steps. It takes time. So again, it's just not ripe at this time to do that.
And if the board is not comfortable with this, the board doesn't have to vote to do the LIP. So that's why we have to keep asking these questions. I don't know if you're prepared to take that position tonight, but I know the developer has come in for several months now. I would say that we did just get information tonight that no one's had an opportunity to review. The letter from the title company, that's not going to be our position to review it. That's a civil matter. So we have the letter, we asked for the letter, but that's a civil matter to determine between the abutters whether they're allowed to do what they say they're allowed to do. What we would probably take a look at would be a revised plan, which the fire department actually already did look at, and they were comfortable with that revised plan. DPW has met with you and indicated some of their concerns that would be addressed through the comprehensive permit process. So at this point, the board has to make a decision as to whether there's enough benefit to the town to partner and go in on a co-application or let the project go forward on its own without any input. And that's why we're trying to get a strong idea and a commitment from the developer.
We've actually submitted more information to your board than we have of any of the other LIPs that we've done. And we've done this even though we thought it was out of order and we didn't think it was really the right time to do it, but it was information we were going to have to do anyway. So it really didn't matter to us. It was a little bit of time delay for us, but we're fine with it. So that's why we didn't object.
Mr. Chambers.
So if the board were to vote on a LIP, is there recourse to withdraw that after the application's been submitted? Should things not be working the way we thought, because there's a lot of unknowns here? Is there a recourse for the board to withdraw their support of a LIP in the future?
The ZBA doesn't have to approve it based on your LIP. They're not obligated.
And as far as whether the town can withdraw once they take a vote to commit to an LIP, that we would have to ask town council to give a ruling on that, or we'd have to research the Mass General Law
Well, any more than you'd want us to back out of our commitments, right? We commit.
Again, hypotheticals here, but if they showed bad faith, if they didn't do what was on the application to the state, if there was major change, I mean, if we were led under false pretenses or something like that, sure, there's recourse. There's recourse for anything, really. But it's an assumption.
So I can state my problem is there's a lot of unknowns. So I'm not saying I don't want to work with them, but there's so many unknowns that we're committing to things that we may not have committed to should we know what that is. And again, I've never worked with you guys. I'm not basing it on that. I'm basing it on the fact that the variables out there and then the board not having the authority over it. And again, I don't know what ZBA is going to go through. I don't know how that whole process works. But right now we're just saying we support something that is completely unknown, consistently changing. And I know in the past, anytime the board has voted to take action, the board's word has some meaning. So if they go to ZBA and they say, oh, the select board said, hey, they wanted to do a lip, is there perceived like, hey, they want this to work, so let's not follow the rules we typically do? Or I don't know. Again, there's a lot of what ifs.
Again, you're not the permitting authority. The ZBA is a permitting authority. You're kind of approving the concept. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but it seems like it might be like just the concept, and all the details need to be worked out through the ZBA. So a lot of unknowns, absolutely. We all agree to that. That's part of the ZBA process, and you have to have confidence in your ZBA.
For the chair, it is, if the board votes to support this, that is a vote of supporting the project. So you're making a statement that you support the project. And that's why if you don't feel you have enough information or you're not comfortable with the information you have, then you probably wouldn't vote to support an LIP. If you were comfortable with what you have and you feel there's a benefit to supporting an LIP versus a traditional 40B, then you would take that position. And I don't know, based on the information you had tonight, if you should make that, or if you're ready to make that decision tonight, or you want to wait and make it in 2 weeks. When you can absorb the information, we can double check with the state. But my understanding is once the board takes a vote, once you commit to this, you're committed to this.
Yes, sir. Okay. I would say we've had the residents come in, we've had the developer come in. We've gone through questions of ripeness from every single angle, and it comes back to the same place. These questions aren't ripe. They're valid questions, right? I'm not saying they're not. It's just not the time for them. Do we want this extra turnaround, as Chief Coleman wanted, to make sure that if there were a fire that they can get their trucks in there? Do we want, on a project that we know is going to happen, that will be paid for by the users in terms of that water connection for redundancy, do we want to have that cost offset so that the town residents don't have to pay it? Those are the questions in my mind. I think we're making a lot more out of this hearing than it really needs to be. I don't know what we will see in 2 weeks from this one plan here. I'm not an expert in looking at these plans. It's not going to show me anything. But we've kicked this around a lot, and I'm just one vote, but I don't see what else we're going to get from this discussion at this point in time. So with that, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to continue the hearing for 2 more weeks.
The chair, just for clarification, this isn't a hearing, it's just a public meeting. I just want to be clear. So just so Sharon's not here to write this down, but she'll go back and look at the minutes, but just if you could just revise that to be a motion to continue the meeting. We're not required to have a hearing. The ZBA will be required to have a hearing when it gets to that point.
Make a motion to continue the meeting at the next select board meeting.
Which is December 12th.
December 12th.
Second.
All those in favor?
I guess.
No. 3-1, it is a vote. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm guessing same time.
Sarah, are you here on the phone?
I'm not here on this phone, but I can certainly call in if I need to.
so we can have another 1 hour hearing.
Yes. I guess I don't understand what more information
We're gonna do
we
this
can
again.
get that will, I mean, because we don't get
So I
to
want to
see
know
the
what we can
engineering
do.
studies.
Yeah, I want to know if we can back out.
Yeah.
Well, we can't know, because
Might
once
take about
it's
2 minutes.
signed to the state, then we're obligated to what we signed to, and they're obligated to what they signed to.
The town manager was going to ask.
Yeah, may I have a motion for a 2-minute
Do I have
recess?
a motion for a 2-minute recess?
Second.
Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is
And then what we can do is try to move people out.
All right, moving on to Select Board General Items. We have gift and acceptances under 5B. We have the Fire Department, Fire Rescue Department for $3,000.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, did I skip something? My apologies.
No, that's what we're on.
No, so we
No,
did
we're on
some
that.
before
Oh,
you
sorry.
arrived.
We moved a lot up because we wanted you to be present for the Perry Place, so I moved a lot of items up to accommodate that.
I would make a motion that we accept and that we let it be generated for the chair's signature.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is unanimous. And the Police Department for $200.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is unanimous. All right, moving on to 5D, we have 2023 liquor license renewals. Jacobson, do you want to add, or?
Sure, all the standard license renewals are in here. I believe you have a letter from DCG. Generally, we have the board take a vote that everything is conditional on our office getting all of the required paperwork in because they're due by the end of December. So everything that you have before you is in order, or where there may be one or two that we're waiting for, in which case they won't get their license if they don't submit all the final documentation.
So through the chair, the pending licenses, they're waiting on various things, or are they all the same thing?
Each one would be different. Sometimes it's just a matter that the application wasn't completed on time, wasn't complete that was submitted, and maybe the application was submitted, but it was missing a piece. So technically, they have until December 31st, but because of the board schedule, we try to take that vote to help the businesses so that when they get all the paperwork in to our office, they'll automatically then get your license if you voted it conditional. If we don't have the appropriate documents and everything that's required, it won't go forward.
So the pendings will remain conditional.
Correct.
Any questions? We have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the list of license renewals, provided that all the applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said licenses are subject to all of the conditions stated upon them. Failure to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, with conditions of the DCG to be placed upon the licenses.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote, unanimous. And 5E, we have the 2023 annual license renewals.
Through the chair, same thing. These are the annual licenses that are due. If there's any information that's still pending, you're taking a vote to make sure that we have all the information in place by the time we issue the license and sign off on it.
Any questions? No? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the list of license renewals, provided that all applicable requirements of the state and town and any of its departments, boards, and commissions have been fulfilled. Said licenses are subject to all of the conditions stated upon them. Failure to comply with any and all conditions shall invalidate the license and render it null and void, with conditions of the DCG to be placed upon the licenses.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote, unanimous.
Thank you. I just wanted to take 1 second to just thank Rachel Pressey in my office. She puts this all together. She works with all of these license holders. It's an incredible amount of work, and she does a really good job. So I just wanted to publicly thank her.
Moving on to town manager items, we have 6A, discussion on and potential vote on ARPA premium pay for municipal employees. Members were provided a very in-depth write-up by Ms. Jacobson. Thank you for that. With options, with examples of what other towns have done. I trust you've all had a chance to file through it. Yeah. Okay, and we can start out with some comments, discussion.
Sure, through the chair, if you'd like me to start. So we recognize that the board, and we've talked about it, town administration agrees, the majority of the funds that come from ARPA should be spent to benefit the community. They should be spent on projects that are priorities. They should be spent to reduce burdens on the taxpayers. And so far, every project that we brought in would do that. When the board asked us to look into premium pay and what kind of impact that would have and how could it potentially be structured, we took a look at it and felt that we would be comfortable recommending that 5 to 6% of the ARPA dollars be spent on premium pay. I think that's more than acceptable to most residents to do that. That leaves 95% of those dollars still going into projects that would alleviate the burden on the taxpayer. That being said, if the board went forward and allocated approximately $300,000, we wanted to give you a number of options. So we did spend several months doing research on other communities. We were able to come up with, and there could be more, but this is what we were able to find through the MMA, through emails to other managers, phone calls. We found about 36 communities that have approved it to date. We found probably 10 or 12 communities that are still considering it. They haven't made a decision yet, but it's still being considered. We believe that it's important to recognize our employees that took extra risks and took extra impacts on their personal life and their family life to provide quality and exceptional services to the Auburn residents. And I understand that is their job. We understand that. But this is a really unique situation. This is a global pandemic that we've never lived through. And I hope to God we never live through it again. But there may be other strains and we may be living through it. And I think we've learned lessons that we can survive it. We can put systems into place, operations into place. We can do things to make it manageable, but we still have to provide the services. I think what we're recommending is that there are 5 options here for the board to look at, all coming in around $300,000. The difference being we based some of them on different models that other communities use. So for instance, one community used the model of $225 a month, which is what the government pays for hazard duty to members of the military. So if you look at it that way, did town employees, and certainly some town employees more than others because of exposure, but it was a hazard duty during that time, so to speak. So we did one model based on that. We did one model based on the city of Worcester and how they did theirs. So I know there's a lot of information here, and I apologize. I tried to break it down as best as I could, but the summary is that ARPA allows for premium pay. The intent of premium pay is to address a couple of different things. Address employees who took additional risks and had additional exposure, direct exposure to the public, or indirect in that maybe they handled certain types of materials. A little less so here in the types of materials that were handled, but yet that is part of the law. The other is to benefit employees that meet certain income guidelines. Now, under the ARPA guidelines, they call those low to moderate income. Some people would argue that it's not, but the law is the law. And the law states that you can have 150% over and above either the state average annual wage or your county average annual wage, whichever is higher. So the state average annual wage was higher than the county average annual wage. So using that figure, it's approximately $109,000. So $109,000 would be the maximum limit unless the employee is not exempt from FSLA, meaning the employee is eligible for overtime. So a salaried employee who's not eligible for overtime, who makes more than $109,000, is not eligible no matter what situation you look at. But employees that make over $109,000 that are eligible could be eligible. So what we tried to do is base our recommendations based on 3 different ways to look at this. You can look at this in a more global aspect and say what employees were the most exposed, which ones took on the greatest risks by doing their jobs, and which ones had the most exposure, direct exposure to the public. And then we tiered that because certainly different employees had a different level of exposure, and some employees had very little exposure. The other way to look at it is as the city of Worcester, they looked at it from an income base. The city of Worcester took a figure of $60,000 and said anybody who makes under $60,000 and is FMLA not exempt, FSLA, they would get a $3,500 stipend. Anybody who made more than $60,000 would get a $1,500 stipend. I don't know where the $60,000 came from, so our option A uses a figure of 109,000, because 109,000 is very clear, it's in the law, that's the figure. So we thought that that would be a fair figure to use. So I think what we're recommending is we think it would be a fair use of the money for $300,000 approximately to be used to thank and recognize our employees and those who took risks. The question that the board would have to look at is it more across the board where you're not making a decision who worked, because there was a third criteria under ARPA, and that's those who worked predominantly in person on site. So those who worked part-time remotely may be eligible for less. Those who worked 100% on site all the time may be eligible for more. You don't have to do that. Same thing, you don't have to do the income, you don't have to do the work on site, and you don't have to do the exposure. So we tried to give you all three options because any and all can apply and be legitimate under the use of ARPA funds. So the figures that you have before us are the best that we could come up with based on payroll. So because there were 5 options and there was a lot of data that needed to be collected here, we made the best assumptions that we could. Our primary recommendations for any option would be, I think it is on, let me just point to you on what page that we're recommending this. The bullets on the, I think 1, 2, 3, bullets on page 4. So what we're recommending is to use, for the period of time, we're recommending to use the 15-month period during the governor's state of emergency, which ran March 10, 2020 to June 15th, 2021. We're recommending premium pay only provided to those employees who are currently employed on the town. So those who are currently on the town payroll at the time that this policy is implemented. We're recommending that temporary and seasonal employees are not eligible. We're recommending, well, it's not a recommendation, it's just, this is the law. Any, as I just mentioned, any employees whose earnings exceed 150% and they're exempt would not be eligible. That's the law. We're recommending that we provide bonus payments to those employees who receive the booster vaccination as an added precaution. And I just want to say, we recognize for health reasons, there are some employees who could not get the vaccine. We understand that. But the reality is those who could get it and those who did get it did have that extra layer of protection. So we were looking to incentivize those employees, but not take away anything. In other words, some communities were looking at not giving any or a less amount to those who were not vaccinated. We're not recommending that. We're recommending an additional amount over and above. We would recommend that we prorate all the payments based on the number of months the employee actually worked. So in other words, if someone's been here 2 months, they're not going to get the same amount that somebody who's been there the entire time. So we'd have to look at prorating that. And then lastly, we would prorate part-time employees. So all the examples that you have in front of you don't really calculate the part-time employees. I think we only had 15 or so that would be eligible. It made assumptions that we have 138 eligible full-time employees. Again, there would be about 12 part-time employees. So we're not talking a significant amount of money on a prorated basis. It utilized estimates of how many employees we placed into each tier. So based on the different scenarios that we gave, we tried to look at the payroll at that snapshot in time and say, okay, this employee would have been at this level and therefore they should fit into this category. We'd have to do the analysis of every single employee. We're not going to do that until and unless the board votes for this, and then we'll go back in and get you the exact numbers. But these are pretty close. We're also utilizing numbers that assume how many employees worked 100% on site and how many worked less than 100% on site. And there are options that don't take that into consideration, so that may or may not be a factor. And we are assuming, again, just for assumption purposes, that about 90% of our eligible employees probably are vaccinated. So we use that figure in there. So that's the overview. All the data is in here. The various plans are in here. Nothing is set in stone. This is to give you an idea of what you could do, how you could arrange it. If you take a look at it and you think just we like this piece of this and this piece of that, we can move it around and come up with some different options. But these are what we thought would be the priorities. And just publicly, I do want to thank all the employees for the work that they did. I've never been so proud and so impressed as during that period of time where we all found out on a dime that we had to change everything. We had to change our operations, we had to change our shifts, we had to change our schedules. I know specifically Fire Alone, they had implemented with the help of the union that they couldn't do any outside work. But I know our police officers were exposed when they went on certain calls. Our firefighters were exposed daily, every day, especially those in the ambulances. There was no way out of it. They had to change their schedules. And I have to say, they agreed to do it. They agreed to do it willingly. And it was the best decision to try to keep them as healthy and safe as possible and keep all the other members of the unit safe as well. Beyond public safety, I did have at one point declare all the town employees as essential because the governor's order came out that if you don't have essential employees, you can only have 25% of your workforce on site at any time. We can't do that. We're a town. We need to function. So the way to get everybody to be in the building was to declare everybody an essential employee. So we did have, there were weeks in the beginning, I think there were 2 months, and then I think we had a couple of other, right at the holidays, times where the non-public safety employees were on split shifts, or occasionally some of them were remote. So our recommendation is that those employees wouldn't get the same level as public safety employees, but yet they were still here every day, they still did their job. There is also our inspectors, and there's only 5 that I can think of, that whenever they had a call, they had to go out and they had to deal with the owner, the property owner, the dog owner, whoever that was, and they actually had direct exposure that some people in town hall did not have. So I do want to, regardless of what happens with this vote, we recommend it. Ed and I support moving forward with some type of recommendation. We don't know what you're comfortable with. We don't know the level you're comfortable with. You haven't had that conversation, so we're showing you what it would look at $300,000. But regardless of what happens, it doesn't take away from our respect and thanks to all of our employees who got this town through. And I think the town did a great job, and I think our public safety officials did a great job.
Okay, thank you. Board, what say you? That's fair. But point of clarification, I think no matter what we do on this vote, we're going to slight somebody.
So I would like to say we don't have to. As we've come before the, town before to use ARPA funds, I think what we've found out and through COVID, the world changed and processes have changed and we've had to, adapt. And I do think, the fire and police and everyone that the town manager just mentioned did extraordinary things. And I think what we could do as a board is vote to allocate money to provide equipment, services, and things like that to these departments to help them continue instead of going backwards. Look at the resilience and how do we prepare for the next step and provide them the tools and resources to continue to do their job and do it as safely as possible. And that doesn't slight any individual and only helps the town grow, which I think, again, is what the ARPA was meant to do. And we've provided funds for quite a few things so that you guys have come before the board. And when I say you guys, the department heads have come before the select board and requested funds for additional equipment. And I think there's a lot more opportunity out there. And we should reserve that $300,000 specifically to those departments to, again, help them in the future.
Ms. Rupley?
I partially agree with you, Mr. Chambers. I think that there was a lot of people that went out of their way, and they deserve some recognition and some of the ARPA funds to go with it. I don't disagree that the departments could use additional funding for training or equipment. But I also think they deserve recognition in a monetary way.
And I think it's a very valid point, Mr. Chambers, but I do disagree as well. I'll be honest with you guys right now. I'm with option C. I did some research this weekend and before the meeting tonight. I hate the fact that we have to almost give a scale, like we're almost prioritizing certain employees over other employees as if we don't value all of you guys, because we do 100%. But at a certain point, we have to come break these numbers down. So option C, I think, is the most equitable in my mind. I would give weight, and I'd like you guys to consider, I believe everyone received an email today from Chief Coleman, kind of highlighting, and really that really important point that sticks with me is the fact that, you know, a lot of these firefighters do work other jobs. You know, it's usually 48 hours on, 48 hours off is your standard. So they not only did they lose income, but they were put in these tough situations early on in the pandemic. The vision in my head that I just keep coming to is nurses, EMTs, firefighters, cops is sleeping in their garages, not wanting to infect their families for those initial days that were so scary. So I do believe that they should be recognized. And my very initial thought was I didn't really agree with this, and I wanted these monies to be used towards capital improvement projects. But after looking at it further, that they do deserve some recognition here for all the great work that they do. So I'd be in support of a hybrid option C with, I know you don't want me spending too much money, but with some sort of recognition further for those 24 employees, the EMTs that Mr. Coleman had laid out. I think they were in particularly tough circumstances. So just kind of putting my cards, it's kind of, I like to do that for you guys. That's, reserve the right to change my position, but that's really where I am at this point.
Through the chair, we can, per Chief Coleman's email today, we can show you what those scenarios would look like. I also think we were just trying to keep this at $300,000 just to show you, for consistency purposes, if you chose a dollar amount, then you're going to have to do a mix and match menu to get to that dollar amount. If the dollar amount is less of a concern for you and you're willing to move a little and you want to look at throwing in other options, you can absolutely do that. And for instance, I would say under option C, which again, it's a great option for those watching, it puts public safety, police and fire at $3,500, employees who performed on-site inspections and responded on-site to things at a $1,000, all other town employees at $500, and those with the vaccinated booster at $250. Now, if you did that, we just did that number to give you the amount. That came to $312,500. But for $6,300, you're able to give a $25 stipend to each employee who worked a vaccination clinic. And they were pretty exposed. Those vaccination clinics came out and they were working at them before they were even vaccinated themselves. So, that's just an added thing that you could put in there. It's only not in there, not because we don't support it, because it's in other ones, because we were just trying to keep those dollar amounts within a certain amount. So certainly, if you wanted to add an additional stipend for those EMTs and paramedics on the ambulance on top of this, we can easily do that. We can add it to any of the options, which again, it's the mix and match menu. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not a requirement of the law through the board, but it's what all the other communities have done. Because they felt that you are rewarding employees who are still your employees. Employees who left, you have to do some research into why they may have left, if there were issues when they left. It's really rewarding employees that left and went to another community. So we're not in favor of that. We're in favor of doing what the majority do, which is to reward the current employees that you have today. Thank them today for what they did when they were here. And it's not that we don't thank those who left, but those who are still here are still serving the community. And we felt that that's a benefit to this community versus to the community that they may be currently working in.
They should be rewarded. Coming from the state side, I've seen many of my fellow employees who got a promotion to another department just when the governor agreed to some sweetener and they get taken out, they don't get that sweetener. So to me, from that perspective, these folks did serve us, and obviously if it's a problem employee, we're gonna think differently about that, but I would not want to exclude them because, again, they were here, and for whatever reason, they might have gotten a better job. We may have encouraged them because there was no growth within their department available. So I don't want to create a problem for people who did serve the community during a very tough time.
Through the chair, there's no problem going back and trying to get that data. It's more complicated, so I would suggest if the board makes the decision to go and do this for those who are retired, that you make a decision on which option first before we go back, because it means going back through payroll. So it's checking payroll and seeing who was here, how often are they here, when did they start, what was their start date, what was their end date, how do you prorate it based on how many months they were here, did they leave a month after? We have an employee who started the day that the state of emergency ended. So it's not that we can't do that. We just went by what the other communities did. We can certainly look at it, but we would just need to know which option you were leaning toward and then go back. For instance, I'll give you an example. When we first looked at it, the total payroll today, and again, that includes seasonal and others that we still have on the payroll now, regardless of whether they were here at the time, is about 196. We narrowed it down to 138 of those 196 that were eligible. So of those, I don't know how many, then we'd have to go back again and see who was actually on the payroll during those periods and how many of those people left, and then do the math to come up with the dollar amount. So we can do that. I would not recommend that we lower some of the amounts to our existing employees to make room for the retired employees. If that's the case, I would just recommend that you increase the amount that you allocate, because I don't think it's equitable to look and add another category of retirees at the expense of your existing employees, whereas adding another category should be on top of that.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, if your active set was reduced by roughly 60, you may be adding another 1/3 or 130 to the total value of any option if you include those individuals. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Julie. This is a very comprehensive report, and she put a lot of time and effort into this, and it's a lot of work. When a decision is made, administratively, it's a lot of work to sift through and to make some determination on where these individuals fit in each option. I don't want to convince you on an option, but C to me is the cleanest. They take that gray out of it, did they work more than 50%, less than 50%? I think it helps make, administratively, it helps make it easier to compile. But certainly that decision, we can do it either way, but that decision is the board's to make.
I think this just illustrates how difficult it's going to be to parse it up. I did want to try to understand incentivizing vaccinations, which have already taken place. Why not just roll that money in or remove it altogether?
I think
Through the
Ms.
chair,
Jacobson stated it pretty
Yeah, the reason
succinctly.
being that if an employee, if we're using ARPA dollars for premium pay, which is to acknowledge and reward those employees who took additional risk, those employees who were able to get the vaccination and chose not to, were at additional risk that they chose. Those employees who got the vaccination took whatever step they could take to protect themselves, and they were still at risk. So that's why we're looking at it as an incentive, not a punishment. We understand, again, not everyone got it, and they have personal reasons for getting it, and that's their personal reason. But if they did get it, we believe that that's an incentive, and they should be thanked for getting it, because that's one extra step they took to protect their coworkers and to protect themselves.
You don't have to like it.
I certainly don't. I do appreciate everyone's, work through this. So looks like I am in the minority on this, but I have been told by other board members that ARPA dollars should be used for those bigger things that will help us in the future. So I think I have lost my case, and I'm willing to work through whatever terms you guys want to work through.
And with that, I certainly I oppose the continuance on the last matter for differing reasons. I think it's a fair point that you want some more time to look at this. So does anybody have a motion?
Make a motion that we continue this item to the next board.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It is a vote.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Casanova slightly beat me to the punch, but I just want to thank both the town manager and the assistant town manager for the hard work that they put in on this package over the last 6+ weeks. As you can see with the detail, it was a tremendous amount of work. It's not lost on the department heads or the town employees. It's truly appreciated. And although it could be a tough vote, unfortunately for you and not me, that's your job. It is a tough decision, but just know it is an important one. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
And if I may say, if the board members have any questions on this between now and the next meeting, please give me a call. I'm happy to explain all of this. I've never done a report with so many footnotes in my life, since I was in college probably. So I know there's a lot of information here that may need a little bit more explanation. I'm happy to provide that. Also happy to, when we have that other discussion, we can, in the meantime, try to find out how many retirees there are, so we can at least have some idea what kind of impact.
A general idea.
A general idea, without having to go through payroll on every single one of these.
And side note, again, I know I've already thanked you, but I literally stopped reading this at one point and said, this is really good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have to say the attachment too, there's an attachment in there on what other communities did. And that's difficult information to get. It's not, it's hard to come up with all of it. I will say that just the other night, last Monday night, Southbridge voted to give $5,000 each to police and fire. And I believe it was $1,250 to all other employees. So, and that was a vote that just took place last week.
In Southbridge, there was opposition to it initially, wasn't
There was opposition initially. I think early on, there was a lot of opposition. Again, just to talk about ARPA funds, we've just tried to be really careful to not come right out the day we got the ARPA funds and say, here's $5 million, just spend it. We don't want to do that. We want to be thoughtful about how we spend it. We want to put a lot of effort into this. And as I thank you for saying that, this took a lot. This is months and months of researching other communities. I think we started in February looking at this. So we want to make sure that we have the information right. We don't want there to be any clawback. We don't want the board to make a decision that you may have to pay money back at some point. So I just want to assure you that any project we come in for ARPA, we're making sure we've done our due diligence on it. I think that if the board, I know it's a very difficult decision for the board, but I think that this is the right decision in some form or another.
And moving on to, we have 6B, vote to extend the current intermunicipal agreement with the town of Oxford. I'll let Ms. Jacobson explain the
Thank you.
background
Through
for
the
that.
chair, I see Nick Schwartz, our DPW Assistant Director, is on the line here. Really quickly, the IMA with the town of Oxford, thank you, is an agreement that we have extended twice now because we were hesitant to go into a new agreement until we knew what was going on in Oxford near the Auburn line with regard to development, because we didn't know what kind of impact that was going to have on our capacity. So we do have a study. Eastland Partners helped fund some of that study. We do have a study. We do have the capacity. We've been working very closely with the town of Oxford. We have a draft new agreement, but we felt, to Mr. Carpenter's point, I agree in a certain, we felt too rushed to get that to you. We got that agreement probably 2 weeks ago. We sent it to town council to review, and he had a couple of questions on it. We felt we couldn't get this done. We had 3 days really, and it was too much pressure to put on Oxford and on us. So what we're recommending is that you vote to extend this agreement until January 31st. And the only reason I'm saying that is because of the meeting schedule that the board has. So right now you have a meeting December 12th. So we're hoping that we can meet with Oxford. It was tough with the holiday, but we're hoping we can meet with Oxford and address some of the issues and questions that town council had. We're pretty much there with the new agreement. We like the language on it. There were just some technical questions. Their attorneys had made some recommendations. Our attorney had made some. So now we have to get the two of them together and hammer this out. So if we can get this to you by December 12th, we're in great shape. If we can't get it to you by December 12th, then there's only 2 meetings in January. So I didn't, and with snowstorms and weather, I didn't want to have to come back another time and ask for another extension because something was weather-related and got pushed out. So basically, I'm suggesting that we extend it to January 31st. We suggested this to the Oxford town manager as well, and I believe they're going to be doing the same thing. Hopefully, again, we can come in December 12th. Most likely, it will be the first meeting in January, which I think is January 9th. And that would still give the board an opportunity to review it and to see it, and even wait 2 weeks if you want, and still take that vote at the end of January. So that's our recommendation.
In short, it's with the lawyers. All right, so do we have any questions? No? Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to extend the agreement to January 31st, 2023.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Of course, it's no coincidence that I won't be here on January 31st. So every tough thing that comes up, I said, let's discuss this on January 31st.
Push it out a little bit.
Right, we'll have a meeting on January 31st.
But with that, we'll have it settled before then.
Yes,
This is
correct.
just covered.
It'll be settled. And I know Nick Schwartz is on the line, and Joanna, I want to thank them. They've put a lot of work into this, as has the DPW director in Oxford and the town manager in Oxford. This has really been, we've had several meetings with them over the last, it's gone back a year now, to really get to an agreement that we can all be comfortable with on both sides. So I want to thank everyone, because this isn't an easy thing to come up with, but it's a necessary thing. Oxford needs to have access through our, that's the way it is. They have to get access to the treatment facility. So
We can't just stop it.
we can't just stop it. So what we can just make sure we're protecting Auburn and make sure we're protecting Oxford and make sure we have triggers in there and benchmarks that we have to reach before certain things have to change. So everyone's done a really good job on it. Right now, it really is just is down to some legal language. So we appreciate it. Thanks for doing that.
All right, moving on to agenda item 6C, we have preliminary discussion of speed zoning on Pinehurst Avenue.
Through the chair, yes, since it's under mine, I can talk about this. So Todd Crane, who's here, hi Todd, had sent an email to the chair and the vice chair and myself regarding some concerns about speeding on Pinehurst, and asked that we would consider reducing the speed limit. So we had to do some research on this, because in a thickly settled area under the law, a thickly settled area would generally be a 30-mile-an-hour zone, unless the authority takes a vote to change that. So we went back and looked, and the Board of Selectmen at some point did take a vote to raise the speed limit to 40 miles an hour. So a lot of work, I'm assuming, went into that. It was, many years ago, a lot of data analysis went into that vote. So to reduce that, Todd had pointed out that Mass DOT guidelines for changing speed limits or changing a vote that was already taken are a little easier now. The issues that we're facing now is when that vote was taken, the charter had that authority vested in the Board of Selectmen. So right now, it's a legal question with Attorney Hennigan to determine who has the authority to overturn a vote that the board took. So right now, who is the authority for setting the speed limit? Is it the town manager? Is it town meeting? Or is it the Board of Selectmen? The complicating factor is the Board of Selectmen was the one that took the vote. So assuming it's the Board of Selectmen, it was at the time, under the charter, town manager is responsible for all town property. So it may fall to the town manager, but I don't see how the town manager could take a vote to overturn a vote that the board took. So it's a legal question. So legally, we just need to find out who has that authority to actually make that kind of decision. Second piece is, even though the law, the guidelines, Mass DOT guidelines, don't require the extensive analysis of data that's required to actually do it the first time, they don't require it to undo it. Our concern, DPW, us, is that we still need to have data to make that recommendation to you, because you need to know what the impacts are. So just by example, I talked to the police chief, Chief Lemon, who's here tonight, along with Deputy Chief Mills, and I suggested that we do another speed study, but we didn't want to do it necessarily last week because with the holiday. Thursday, most people are home. Friday, a lot of people are not. A lot of people coming through Auburn to shop, we hope. We hope there was a lot of traffic. So we don't think last week was a good indicator. But to give you an example, they did do, just for a baseline kind of thing, they did do a speed study last week and showed that the average speed was 41 miles an hour. And the speed is set at 40. So are there occasional times that someone's going faster? Yes, absolutely. But the average median speed was 41 miles an hour. I don't know if the... 42.14. Oh, I'm sorry, 42.1. Thank you. So I don't know if the chief wants to say a little bit about that study, but he's doing another study this week to just see, we have to get an idea of what are drivers driving at.
For the chair, Mayor. So you said average and then you said median?
No, I'm sorry. That's why I'm going to have the chief.
Okay.
Because I did say both. I want to make sure I get the right one.
So through the chair, good evening, everyone. It's been a long meeting. So when I discussed this with the town manager, I contacted my traffic officer, Jason Miglianico, who's certified to use a lot of the speed measuring devices and equipment. And he did a quick 3-day analysis, November 25th through the 28th. And Julie and I had discussed that the traffic volume may be skewed because of the holiday. So he did it. It was interesting results, but not surprising. The speeds moving from Auburn into Worcester, 35 in front of the police station, 30 as you approach St. Joseph Church, then it drops down to 25 down to that short area until you pass the pond, and then it has a quick speed change up to 40 miles per hour. So on average, there were 1,152 vehicles that passed per day through that location. Average speed was 42.14. The 50th percentile was 41.44. And the 85th percentile was 44.29. Minimum speed was 40, and the high speed was 59, which is clearly driving too fast. But if you look through the results, and this generates very, very specific results, it reflects a lot of our streets. What do I look at as police chief? I look at, and let me explain this too. Nobody takes traffic violations more serious than me. I was not a lot of people's friend early in my career, enforcing the traffic laws and speeding violations. Before I come out with any conclusions, I would really like to do the traffic study after probably this week, when the traffic volume dies down with people that have traveled back home, and take a look at it. Like all of our roads, we're always going to have some high flyers. We do traffic studies in front of the police station, and we'll have vehicles go by the police station at 65 sometimes at 2 o'clock in the morning when the officers are out on the road doing patrols. So you're always going to have your high flyers, and speed signs generally don't change traffic behavior. It's generally enforcement. But this initial study clearly coincides with the current speed limit down there. But as Todd pointed out, and the town manager just mentioned, if you look at the neighborhood, it's by definition, it's a thickly settled area. So you have to pair that with the actual speed data and the flow of traffic. I had Deputy Chief Mills go down tonight because I couldn't remember what the speed limit was down on James Street, where Pinehurst changes into James. And it's a mixed bag down there where they just did the condos or the apartments down there, and they did all the improvements. It's 40 for part of it, and then it drops down to what, Scott, 35? 30, down where there's pedestrian crosswalks and all of that. So I get it if you're a resident down there and there's cars going by. The perception is that they're driving pretty fast. And I remember when I first came to Auburn, it kind of seemed like that transitioning from a 25 to a 40 was pretty drastic, but it's not a section of roadway that we have a lot of crashes on. My crashes happen on Southbridge Street, they happen on Washington Street, Route 20, and some of our major intersections. But I certainly think Todd brought up a good point. It certainly merits a study to get more accurate results, and I can certainly report back here to the board.
Do you know the distance from the 40 to the 30 zone?
Distance from the 40 to the 30 zone, can you clarify?
So when you said it's 40 down near the condos on the Worcester, then drops down.
I didn't measure out Worcester. We just really dealt with the Worcester speeds, but I wanted to give you that information tonight when we came here, just to see where both roads literally intersect with each other. And, you know, one moment you're on Pinehurst Street and the next moment it's James Street. But when you first come into Worcester from Auburn, it's 40 there.
Yeah, I think right by that ballpark is where it changes. They have that Little League Park is where it changes to 30.
Right. So there's a lot of data to be gleaned, and I think before you make a decision on this, when I get the next traffic study, I'll get that disseminated to the board for your review. I mean, right down to when the cars went by, how fast they were going, and the time. And so I learned a little bit about that section of roadway today too.
So I don't want to ask him, but is it possible to understand the distance that the speed limit is 40? And if we're going from 30 back down to 30, is there a need to go up to 40 there?
Through the chair, that's a legitimate question. When you read the Mass DOT guidelines, they specifically state that decisions to change a regulated speed zone, which is what this is, it was voted to be a regulated speed zone at 40, need to be taken very seriously, whether you're raising it or you're most likely decreasing it. Because decreasing the speed limit has not been shown to decrease accidents or decrease bad driver behavior. It doesn't change driver behavior. So drivers are going to speed, whether the speed is at 40 or 30, you're still going to have some of those issues. I think we wanted to look at crash data, and from what the chief's telling me, there haven't been. That's not an area.
I'm just saying that is not through the chair. It's not a road that we have a tremendous amount of crashes on. It's just not. For example, we've had some horrific crashes, and I may have even spoken before the board on this, at the intersection of Washington Street and Route 20. And I've complained to Mass DOT when Bill Coyle was here. He helped me he requested 7 years worth of crash data for Washington Street, where it funnels down from 4 lanes down to 2 at Old Common Road down there. They raised the speed limit, it was 40. They raised it down there. I've got a serious problem with that. We've had horrible crashes down there. We just had another real bad one very recently. So when Eastland Partners did their development, Mass DOT sent a number of engineers out and people to look at that. And I went with them to analyze that whole section of roadway. And Mass DOT assured me they were going to take a hard look at that, because the engineers that were there at least told me that they thought that was too fast for the area. But those are the numbers. That's how they generate it. They generate it through these speed studies, and the speed studies was showing that the average speed through there is probably like 52 miles an hour, and that's how they raised the speed. It didn't make any changes with the road design. I think one of the reasons we don't have back to Pinehurst, one of the reasons we don't have a lot of crashes on Pinehurst is because it's a fairly wide street with good visibility. But it's definitely cut through from the city to Auburn and likewise. But that's what I tend to do. We'll do another traffic study. We'll look at it. Through the chair, Mr. Chambers, I'll have Jason Migliano go. He can get those figures and distances very easily with his use of his laser handheld devices that gives him distances. But that would be the transition. So it coming down after St. Joe's Church, you're at St. Joe's, you're at a 30. It changes to 25 for that short stretch down the hill, go over the bridge, and then you're at 40 heading into Worcester. So we'll take a look at that.
Through the chair, if I can add the other element of the Mass DOT regulations and guidelines say that you shouldn't just reduce a speed zone just to try to reduce cars speeding, especially if you've done a speed study and you're not seeing a lot, without it being part of a broader overall program. And one of the things that we've been talking about with DPW is, and Joanna Pacon, a DPW director, would be to potentially be looking at doing a broader project coming down Pinehurst as another gateway into Auburn. You know, something where maybe we can look at down the road, getting it on the state tip list, getting a larger project, getting it reconstructed. That would have more favoritism with Mass DOT to actually, at that point, maybe reduce your speeds, because maybe at that point you could get sidewalks on both sides. Maybe you could do some pedestrian things. You could do a bike trail. You could do some other things that would warrant reducing a speed limit. And at the same time, we can work toward improving a gateway into Auburn and make it more attractive and hopefully safer. So that's something that we've been talking about. Obviously, we didn't get to that point yet, but when this came up about Pinehurst, it was just coincidental because the DPW had just raised that issue to us about looking at the next broader plan, similar to what we've done for Auburn Street and right through Drury Square.
Through the chair, can I ask, do you know, I know you mentioned it, but do you know why they put it at 40? Just, it's one long stretch that's 40 and then it goes back, like it comes out of Worcester at 30 and then it goes back. And I have reached out to some people that also, in addition to Todd's comments, live on that street. And they have said they have tried to have it pushed back down to 30 and just weren't able to make it happen. I don't know how far that got, but is there a reason that, I mean,
I don't know. It was 30. I don't have that. I'm sorry. I don't have that email in front of me. But the day, I think it was 30 some odd years ago. I think it was actually maybe even 40. It was, I think that vote might have been in the 80s, in the early 80s. So I tried to see if I could come up with any kind of minutes on discussion. I didn't find anything yet because it goes back so far. I don't even know if we still have those from 40 or 50 years ago, but it was a long time ago. But at the time, Mass DOT, like they do now, they probably required all kinds of studies, and they're really specific what kinds of studies you have to do and how often you have to do them, and you have to hire engineers, and there's a lot of work that you have to do to get that. So my assumption is that they may have done a speed study, and the average speeds may have been around that. We've had other cases that the chief just pointed to where we've had residents say, you have to come reduce the speed limit in our neighborhood. We do the speed studies, and the speed studies are showing that it's maybe 5 miles an hour more than the posted speed limit. The state would recommend that you raise it 5 miles an hour. So it's really having the opposite effect of taking a look. So my guess is that's what happened, but I don't know 40 years ago how it got there. I can say I've been here 12 years, and this is the first request that I've seen come through to the board to reduce the speed limit there. We've had requests in other areas of town, but that's the first time we've seen it for there.
And with the shared street grant that the town of Auburn got awarded, we're hoping to kick that off in the spring with DPW, but we're running out of warm weather for cement to be poured and implement the signage and the notifications around the schools. And one big area that we focused on was Oxford Street because it dealt with the park, it dealt with the Swanson Road, the schools on Swanson Road. And I'm hoping that with the enforcement part of the project, that the message is going to be sent to slow the traffic down. Again, that's generally the citizens of Auburn, their biggest concern with what they want to see the police department do, because it's the perception, it's a quality of life issue for the people that live on, especially a lot of the cut-through roadways like Oxford Street, Bryn Mawr Avenue, Pinehurst Street, that they're no different, but we'll see what the study generates.
Also, through the chair, can I ask, can you reach out to Worcester and see if people are going 30 till they hit the 40 and that's, where they speed up? I mean, because if they're going 30 in Worcester, I don't know that there's a need for it to bump up to 40 to just drop back down.
So interestingly enough, through the chair, the Worcester actually has a speed trailer down there now. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that was a component of the redesign of the roadway. They've been working on it for a couple of years now. I'm sure that was a component of it. And they should have a lot of that data. That's why I wanted to know if they changed the speeds down there. They do have that posted 30 down there in the business area. That definitely makes sense because there's a lot of pedestrian traffic walking from one side of the street to the other.
So through the chair, if the board wants to pursue this, I think one of the things that we have to do is determine who has the authority to change the speed limit and who is technically there's a word for it in Mass DOT, the manager of the traffic rules and regulations. And it's, at some point in certain bylaws that we have, it's the police department. And at some point it is, on Mass General law, it could either be town meeting or the Board of Selectmen, or in our charter, it could be the town manager. So I really think we need town council to make the determination who can overturn that vote. Because the vote was taken, it is a valid vote, and now we need to know how to undo that if the board decides you want to do that.
And assuming, when we get that answer, we're not beholden to the DOT, their analytics on how they come to speeds, right? It's really whatever decision we wanted.
Not new, but within a couple of years ago, Mass DOT changed the regulations on eliminating a speed zone and how you have to do that. So there's still certain things that you have to provide, but you're not required to do the extent of the engineering studies that had to be done to get it in the first place.
All right. So do we want to have town administration pursue that with town council?
I
Also make a suggestion. Mrs. Goodrich lived on Pinehurst Ave right around that time. You might want to reach out to her. And George Jewell was a selectman. And Mr. Blaze was a selectman at that time. They may, and George lives not too far off of Pinehurst, so he may have a clear memory of it. And I'm not quite sure where Doreen lived on Pinehurst, but she was living on Pinehurst right around that time. So they may have some further color to add to it.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. All right, we have no tabled items, so moving on to agenda item 8A. Thank you, Chief Lemon.
Thank you.
Moving on to, we have Mr. Carpenter with the student representative update.
I'm not going to read the email. I'm going to presume you guys
Yes.
reviewed it. And just looking for feedback and support to move this down to the school department to see what their thoughts are ultimately.
I'm fine with it going forward. I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
obviously, we want the school committee, school department's approval.
Right.
So I guess my one question would be the 12 select board meetings. Any particular reason?
It's half.
Okay.
It can be any number you want it to be. I just figured at least half shows a good effort. Having some responsibility with it, also that education component of learning about the finance committee and some of those things. Housing and bylaws, we had our own relatively young member who was very interested in zoning. So there's fun to do with that. And it's the next wave.
Thank you. Okay. So you're going to move that forward? Do you need any?
I would make a motion that the board approve this time and authorize them to go through the school committee and gauge their thoughts and report back.
Do we have
Make
that
that
motion? In a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. All right. No minutes. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It is a vote. Good meeting, guys.